Buenas tardes a todos, ¿cómo están? Bien, ¿qué tal el trayecto? Bueno, es un gusto recibirles a nombre del MUAC y de Campus Expandido, el programa académico del museo. Mi nombre es Guillermo García Pérez, soy el curador académico responsable de Campus, y para mí es un verdadero honor darle la bienvenida esta tarde a la filósofa y ensayista francesa Catherine Malabou, para quien pido un aplauso. Voy a ser muy breve. Quiero solamente agradecer a Edgar González Varela, coordinador del posgrado en filosofía en UNAM, y a todo su equipo, al comité estudiantil del posgrado, que fue quien también empujó y votó mucho para que Catherine pudiera estar aquí estos días en la Ciudad de México, que además es la primera vez de Catherine en la Ciudad de México. Por supuesto, a nuestros colegas del Festival Internacional de Teatro Universitario, donde esta actividad se contextualiza, a la coordinación de Humanidades, al equipo de Campus Expandido, como siempre, y especialmente también a Ainhoa Suárez Gómez por la complicidad de todos los involucrados en este evento y por la ayuda en las gestiones de esta conferencia y del seminario intensivo que está sucediendo esta misma semana. Desde hace varios años con Ainhoa hemos buscado y querido empatar agendas para hacer posible esta visita, y hoy por fin se hace realidad, por lo cual estamos muy emocionados y contentos. Voy a presentar brevemente a Catherine Malabou, profesora en el Centro de Investigación de Filosofía Europea Moderna de la Universidad de Kingston en Londres, y en la cátedra Jacques Derrida de la Universidad de California, Irvine. Catherine célebremente colaboró con el propio Jacques Derrida, quien asesoró su tesis doctoral publicada en 1996 con el título El porvenir de Hegel. Desde entonces, los libros de la doctora Malabou suman volúmenes tan relevantes como Ontología del accidente, Los nuevos heridos, Metamorfosis de la inteligencia, El placer borrado, Clítoris y pensamiento, Semicuerpo, escrito junto a Judith Butler, o recientemente A ladrón, anarquismo y filosofía, felizmente todos ellos traducidos al español. Yo personalmente conocí el trabajo de la doctora Malabou a través del libro ¿Qué hacer con nuestro cerebro? Este es un libro que ya tiene algunos años, desde el año 2004, y de inmediato me conmocionaron y me conmovieron las rutas transdisciplinarias que la doctora propone entre filosofía, neurociencia, estética y psicoanálisis. También me impactó mucho su propuesta tan compleja, tan poco panfletaria al mismo tiempo, de politización del cerebro, la mente, la psique y el cuerpo. En este libro, ¿Qué hacer con nuestro cerebro?, fue la primera vez que me encontré con su concepto clave de la plasticidad, que obviamente también guiará la conversación de hoy, y que con el paso de los años no ha hecho sino ganar centralidad en las discusiones filosóficas, políticas y científicas contemporáneas. Es una palabra un concepto muy especial y muy interesante, ¿no? Plasticidad. Recibir la forma, pero también cambiar la forma, borrarla, romperla, rehacer la forma, crearla, inventarla, transformarla. Es un concepto también muy distinto al que estamos más habituados, como el de la flexibilidad, mucho más cercano a cierta agenda neoliberal que un libro como este y otros libros en su bibliografía también confrontan radicalmente, ¿no? A través de este concepto de la plasticidad, creo que se abre un horizonte de posibilidades políticas en un arco enorme que va de lo sináptico a lo social y de vuelta, pero se inaugura antes la propia posibilidad de la apertura. Abrir, apertura, qué radical se ha vuelto un término tan simple en una época de cerrazón tan profunda tan contundente, tan abrumadora y tan descorazonadora. ¿De qué nos sirve tener un cerebro nuevo?, se pregunta Catherine en este libro, si no tenemos una identidad nueva, si el cambio sináptico de nuestro cerebro no cambia nada. ¿Y qué recogemos de todos estos discursos, de estas descripciones del hombre neuronal, de estas revoluciones científicas, sino la ausencia de revolución en nuestra vida, de ausencia de revolución en nuestro sí mismo? La doctora Malabou se pregunta qué nuevos horizontes abren los nuevos cerebros, y además responde: todos los fascinantes descubrimientos de las neurociencias quedan para nosotros como letra muerta, no llegan a destruir nuestras viejas representaciones del cerebro en la medida en que no son capaces de liberar posibilidades, nuevas formas de vida y, por qué tener miedo a decirlo, nuevas maneras de ser feliz. Particularmente en estos días tan oscuros, decir esto no es poca cosa. Bienvenidos todos nuevamente, muchas gracias por estar aquí. Cedo la palabra a Ainhoa Suárez, no sin recordarles antes que contamos con los dispositivos de traducción simultánea, que creo que ya les comentaron en la entrada, y que al final de la conferencia sostendremos una sesión de preguntas y respuestas. Muchas gracias a todos y bienvenidos.
Gracias, Guillermo. Yo seré mucho más breve. Quizá como empiezo con una confesión. Hace 10 años Catherine y yo empezamos a hablar de la posibilidad de que viniera a México, y hoy, una década después, se vuelve esta especie como de sueño en realidad. Creo que hablo por muchas y muchos de nosotros que estamos involucradas en este evento, es decir, que estamos muy contentos, muy conmovidos de tenerla aquí. Catherine es una de las voces quizá más incisivas y renovadoras del pensamiento contemporáneo, como bien dijo Guillermo, filósofa, ensayista, pero quizá tendría que decir que sobre todo es una maestra. Su obra ha trazado un territorio único, donde la filosofía se entrelaza con la neurociencia, la tecnología, el psicoanálisis, las teorías feministas y la crítica política. Esa noción de plasticidad, de la capacidad de dar, de recibir y de anular la forma, ha hecho que Malabou nos enseñe a pensar la materia, la identidad, el cuerpo y la razón como campos siempre en transformación. Campos abiertos tanto a la creación como también a la destrucción. Hoy, en el marco de este evento, quiero invitarles a que celebremos no solo la oportunidad de escucharla, sino también de dejarnos afectar por su trabajo. Que sea esta una ocasión para abrir el pensamiento, para explorar sus pliegues y sobre todo para dejarnos interpelar por una fuerza viva, por una fuerza encarnada. Es una filosofía que no teme a lo intempestivo y que precisamente quizá por eso nos invita a imaginar nuevas formas de imaginar, de pensar la libertad en estos tiempos en los que se necesita ese tipo de pensamiento. Gracias por acompañarnos y bienvenida.
Well, thank you so much for these beautiful introductions. I want to say buenas tardes to you all. Thank you to the UNAM. I'm so pleased and honored to be here. Thank you to the MUAC, of course, Postgrado and Filosofía y su comité estudiantil for their invitation. It's been a pleasure. I already gave a talk yesterday, and I'm very happy to go on with today's talk. So I will show you a few images. Please. I want to show you first. Right? Yeah, sorry. You know, I'm not very... Okay, so I want to... This is an image made by a friend of mine who works with artificial intelligence. It's called Double Gloved. And it's a kind of symbol of what I want to talk to you about today. So I would like to start by saying that the notion of humanity is losing its contours. Where does humanity begin? Where does it end? Should we even keep this name when we know that our microbiome, shelters animal colonies, when the boundaries between our bodies and the environment are increasingly porous, when ecosystems weave relations among all living beings, and when stones, rivers, mountains, and soils are both the witnesses and the victims of our devastations, as the word Anthropocene reminds us. Not to mention, on the other side of nature, the artificial becoming of reality, of intelligence, and of affects. Where does humanity begin? Where does it end? The question is not simply who are we? It has become what can we become and who can we become? So to confront these questions, I propose to turn to a concept that has accompanied me for a long time, plasticity. And so I will show you the plan of my talk. I want to show this, yeah. So this will be the structure of my talk, the double face of plasticity, from the paradigm of the trace to that of the form, post-humanism and transhumanism, and conclusion, the responsibility of the threshold. So first, in the first part, I will show that plasticity, what I call the double face of plasticity, is because plasticity is at once creative and destructive, which makes it very difficult to determine with certainty the threshold of resistance between formation and deformation, construction and destruction. Second, in the second part, I will argue that this notion of plasticity, now central in many domains, biological, technological, artistic, signals a major paradigm shift, the passage from the paradigm of inscription or trace to that of configuration of form, so a change of paradigm. And then I will draw consequences of this change of paradigm by saying a few words about posthumanism and transhumanism that are in fact conflicting notions. And in conclusion, I will show the political importance of this change of paradigm. So first, the double face of plasticity. Sorry. This is, I wanted to start with that. I'm sorry, I'm not very good at that. So according to its etymology, that comes from the Greek plastein, which is to mold. The word plasticity has two basic senses. It means both the capacity to receive form, clay or marble, for example, is called plastic, and the capacity to give form, as in the plastic arts or in plastic surgery. In French, the word plastique, with Q-U-E, comes from the Latin plasticus, itself derived from the ancient Greek plastikos, meaning an object produced by molding, such as a sculpture or a pot. And the substantive plasticity appears in the 19th century to characterize suppleness, the faculty of adaptation, the ability to evolve, and plasticity also characterizes repair, healing, regrowth, regeneration. So today, we most often think, and Guillermo said a few words about that, of brain plasticity. Because, as you know, in contemporary neurology, plasticity has become a major concept. And current neurobiologists think of the brain as a sculpture that is something modifiable, formable, and formative at the same time. So brain plasticity operates on three levels: the modeling of neuronal connections, developmental plasticity in the embryo and the child, and the modification of neural connections, which is the plasticity of synaptic modulation throughout life. That is the way in which our brain changes form according to the influences that we receive, education, environment, traumas, etc. And brain plasticity was first discovered by the great Spanish neurologist, Ramon y Cajal, who was the first to discover that the brain tissue was discontinuous, that is made of neurons and connections called synapses. So neurons correspond among themselves through the synapses, and through the synapses run neurotransmitters that modulate the efficacy of the influence that we receive on our brain. So for example, if you play the piano, the connections linked with piano playing will grow in size and volume. If you don't use them, they will depress, say the neurologists say. So this is brain plasticity. Plasticity, I can give you a definition. Plasticity in the nervous system means an alteration in structure or function brought about by development, experience, or injury, which means that everything we live during our lifetime has an influence on our brain. So, as you know, I was talking about repairing. Plasticity is also a repair. So, for example, in the case of epilepsy, some patients may be rescued by enhancing neuronal plasticity with brain neuromodulation techniques. So, the brain is a very interesting laboratory for plasticity because it really illustrates sculpture, transformation, modification, potentialization, depression, repair, etc. So why this name? Why did the neurologist use that name that, as I said in the beginning, is very old, and in the beginning was just designating something artistic? Why that name? It is because, as Guillermo evoked, it came, I mean, the name, in fact, for them, comes from the physics of materials. In the physics of materials, you distinguish between plasticity, flexibility, and elasticity. Flexibility is a material that can be repeatedly bent or stretched without breaking. Elasticity is the property of a material to return to its original shape after being bent or deformed. None of these two words are adequate to characterize this. Plasticity, by contrast, as I was saying in the beginning, designates, of course, the ability to be formed and transformed, but at the same time to resist too much an important deformation. Just like the sculpture, once it is sculpted, it cannot go back to its initial form. A sculpture is not elastic, it is plastic because it stays as it is. So that's why the challenging, the philosophical challenge, not only philosophical but also scientific and particularly neurological, the main challenge is resistance. What is a resistance to deformation? And where is the threshold? Every plasticity entails a threshold of resistance to deformation. And that is, once again, the main challenge that comes with this notion. But I have also to add a new characteristic, in addition to formation, transformation, resistance, etc., which is destruction. Plasticity is a very complex term because at the same time, plasticity also designates the capacity to destroy the very form that it is able to receive or create. Hence the plastic with a C, which is an explosive. So in fact, plastic also means able to explode. So in fact, the threshold of resistance is something very complex within plasticity, because plasticity is a dialectical notion. On the one hand, construction, repair, etc., are all positive notions, but also the capacity to explode. Hegel talks in terms of bombing. He says that plasticity is the capacity of spirit to be a bomb, to act like a bomb, and you can hear into in this you can hear terrorism, revolution, etc., etc. So it's also, I chose the image of a volcano because plasticity is also that. Not only the beautiful brain, but also this, that is the explosion. So it is clear, as I tried to show, that plasticity is situated between two extremes. That's why it is a dialectical notion. On the one side, the image of taking form, sculpture, plastic object, and on the other, annihilation of all form. And we know that this negative plasticity also operates in the brain, cutting through neural connections, like scissors, as what happens in traumas, for example, or sometimes it can also cover them with plaques, as in Alzheimer's disease. So the brain is a plastic organ, as you can see, in two senses. First, because of its capacity to be transformed, and on the other hand, its capacity to be destroyed. And there even exist identities formed by destruction, people who have totally lost the memory of their former selves, for example, and have become new persons. So I'll go back to memory in a moment. So just to summarize this first moment, you can see that plasticity means to receive form, to give form, to repair, to resist deformation, but also to destroy or to self-destroy. That's why for me, that's why I'm so interested in that concept that is so unique, whose range of meanings extends between so many opposite poles, and this very ambiguity makes it so difficult to understand it's true, but also endlessly fascinating. And in my view, this is perhaps the term that describes most adequately what the human can be today. So my second moment is the change of paradigm, from the paradigm of the trace to that of the form. As I said, to start with, the key to this complexity is the threshold. Because in all the meanings I have just exposed, the question is, where does it start? Where does it end? When is something creative? When it is destructive? When is it formative? When is it pathological? What is a pathology? What is health? Etc., etc. And then, of course, the problem is what is resistance. What is resistance to an excess of deformation? So what is deformation? What do I call deformation? It can be, of course, physical wounds. It can be psychic wounds, traumas, but also social or political injuries, natural catastrophes as well. How much adaptability can we demand from the living? How much oppression, how many traumas of war or famine, how many aggressions, how many rapes can be borne? For animals, how far can we push industrial farming? For the earth, how far can we push extractivism, the exploitation of soil and resources? And I could go on multiplying the questions. Where does the threshold of resistance lie? Where is the line, once again, between creation and destruction, between beneficial transformations and deadly mutations? Which changes are creative and which are destructive? And the shift from the paradigm of inscription that I will now explain, the shift from the paradigm of inscription to that of form makes answering these questions all the more difficult. So just a new image. This is the wax tablet that is supposed to illustrate the paradigm of inscription. Until, let's say, the mid-90s, the model of inscription still prevailed. By inscription, I mean essentially writing, that is, imprinting something on a support. Writing, but also drawing or whatever, all kinds of marks on a, what Derrida would call a subjectile, a piece of paper, a table of marble, etc. Until quite recently, archiving was the servant of memory, almost its synonym. In fact, the threshold of resistance for a long time has been the notion of archive. And the archive was defined as a place of inscriptions in all senses of the term. Why was it a threshold of resistance? Because an archive was supposed to preserve the memory of transformations and allow them to be judged, allowed for critical distance, interpretation, for making visible the limits between formation and destruction, progress and catastrophe. Historians, of course, are using archives in order to see from afar what was, to speak briefly, a good transformation or a bad one. I said earlier that plasticity meant resistance to deformation. And in fact, as we can see, the more plasticity develops, that is, the more transformability develops in AI, technology, medicine, even in art, the more archiving disappears in favor of data, replacement, effacement, simulation, or morphing. So what we witness today is the disappearance of archives. Archiving, of course, still exists, but it belongs to another era. Today, data has substituted for archiving. And of course, as classical archiving disappears, replaced, as we immediately think, by big data, the threshold between construction and destruction becomes thinner and thinner. Recent discoveries about memory confirm this decline and reduction. Scientists today describe memory in a new way, insisting precisely on the disappearance of archiving. So I want to quote, yes, a very interesting book by the Nobel Prize, Eric Kandel, who wrote a book called Memory from the Mind to Molecules. Memory does not exist in a single site or region of the central nervous system, which means that, contrarily to what we thought, we used to think, memory is not an archive, it's not a place where souvenirs, memories are archived, because memory is distributed among many cerebral sites. As you know, now memory is fragmented. We have in the brain the amygdala, the hippocampus, the cerebellum, the prefrontal cortex, and we know we have several memories like episodic, declarative, semantic, procedural, etc., etc. So, in fact, this pluralization of memories end up in the fact that our memories, our souvenirs, are not encoded as images or traces. Our memories, and this is totally revolutionary, this is a very revolutionary discovery in neuroscience, our souvenirs don't leave any material trace in the brain. There are no marks on neural connections. The only thing we have is the production of modifications in the forms of the connections, as we saw in the Ramon y Cajal image. So once again, memories act on neuronal activity and can modify the size and volume of our connections. But these are not archival traces because you cannot read them. That's the difference. between the plasticity of the brain and the fact of writing on a wax tablet. The model of memory inscribing on a tablet is obsolete. So the substitution of plasticity, that is the change of form, for inscription and trace, constitutes one of the fundamental shifts in the contemporary neurobiology of memory. And conceptualizing the obsolescence of the writing metaphor has become one of the most urgent philosophical tasks. Eric Kandel, this scientist, has spent decades working on the synapse, the basic structure of the brain, and its role in controlling the flow of information through neural circuits needed to encode and store memories. So how does memory work? First, there's a selection. The brain operates a selection between memories. Memories that will be consolidated and classified long-term, and those that will be discarded as short-term. Long-term memory, as we said, are not stored in just one part of the brain. They are widely distributed everywhere. These long-term memories are potentializing the connections. The connections become bigger, as I said. Kandel said they are potentiated, while the others, short-term memories, are depressed and after some time just disappears. They just disappear. So these modifications, as I said a moment ago by showing you the Ramon y Cajal image, are made possible by neurotransmitters that make energy flow between the different connections. So our brain activity, our memory activity, is a constant interchange between long-term memories, short-term memories, a very fragile economy that can also be destroyed when we see in Alzheimer's or other pathologies. So I want to show you the difference between the two models. Once we had that, what Freud called the Wunderblock, the magical block, which is the inscription paradigm. So even Freud says that even when we have the feeling that the memories are erased, they in fact always are underlying, and this is the main idea of psychoanalysis, that nothing is ever forgotten, because it is inscribed. So even if we don't remember consciously, the traces of our psychic life, of our childhood, of our traumas, and this is one of Freud's main ideas, they are always inscribed under the surface. And we can always bring them back, and this is the meaning of the psychoanalytical cure. Rather, in this model, where memories circulate long-term, short-term, potentialization, depression, no trace is ever left. And when the brain dies, everything disappears. So at some point, scientists try to analyze Einstein's brain because of his genius, and when they did, in fact, this brain looked just like any other. So, no traces. I think this is very important, that the Wunderblock, there's a magical block, is totally an obsolete metaphor. So, memory no longer proceeds by imprint. It proceeds by configuration. Neural assemblies form, dissolve, and reform without depth, without sediment, without any text. So we are thus moving from an archaeological model made of traces, strata, archives, to a morphological model, form, arrangements, plasticity. And if I insist on the biological memory, it's just an example, because this shift, the passage from this to that is also very present in other domains, like particularly technology, the digital, artificial intelligence. This is a world when the archive becomes totally unstable, because you can create anything you want and say, this is a trace, this is a memory, even if it is just a form that can disappear. So this is one of the major challenges today. Because for a long time, as I said, because of archive, because of the tablet, because of the books, because of the psychic writings, because of the unconscious as a reservoir of traces, we could decipher traces, we could understand, we could read, we could judge. Now, with the new paradigm, how can we decide what the critical thresholds are? That is, once again, what is the limit between creation and destruction? And it is particularly sensitive when we think of post-truth, fake news, and all the images made by artificial intelligence. We cannot see them, you agree with me, as traces. We cannot really read them. So what do we do with them? How do we confront them? It of course demands a totally new capacity. It demands that we become plastic. That is, that we renounce, or at least change, our capacity to read into something else, which is we are summed up to respond morphologically to these morphological changes. We have, in a way, to become like artificial created images. We are transformed by technology. And so well, this is something I'm trying to think about. We are totally, we have to abandon our habits of understanding. So it's a new hermeneutics, a new way of interpreting the world that is emerging today with plasticity. So now I want to move to post-humanism and transhumanism, as I announced a moment ago, because it is, of course, impossible in a reflection on humanity and plasticity not to evoke these two currents, post-humanism and transhumanism. And I will show you a few things in a moment. In fact, many people think they are the same. They are not the same. They are rival currents with very different visions of plasticity. But today, unfortunately, transhumanism has taken power in more than worrying a way, which makes it even more difficult to determine and fix the threshold. Because what I just said, like the difficulty to approach this new world, is made even more difficult because we are governed, even if we don't know it, by transhumanist ideology constantly. Even if we are not aware necessarily of it, it is the major ideology that runs through the tech giants. So let me explain briefly the difference between the two. I personally have never been a post-humanist, but I do have sympathy for this current, whose emblematic figure, I suppose that you know her, all of you, is Donna Haraway, with the cyborg. So while transhumanism focuses on using technology to enhance human capabilities, post-humanism challenges fixed human identity. In this sense, it comes closer to a theory of plasticity. What Haraway is trying to do is to show the positive sides of plasticity by saying the good thing is that we can change our identities. And we can get rid of gender frontiers, etc., etc. Transhumanism is much more different. It's like, how can we become more performant? How can we enhance our capabilities? So posthumanism is an interdisciplinary movement that includes thinkers from philosophy, literature, music, and science. Another representative, before I say a few words about Haraway, there's another woman thinker called Catherine Hales, who worked a lot on technology, and she has a book, How We Think, and she calls technogenesis, I quote, the continuous reciprocal causality between human bodies and techniques. So technogenesis is important because precisely it can give another name to plasticity, showing that this new morphological capacity that are asked of us are allowing for a kind of interconnection between the mind and the machine, a kind of new hybridization. Donna Haraway defends the view that human identity is not defined solely by biology, but is produced through relationships with other entities, animals and machines mainly. As you know, she has a book on dogs, and her famous essay, which is Cyborg Manifesto, she has this very interesting sentence: why should our bodies end at the skin or include, at best, other beings encapsulated by skin? So the threshold of resistance for Haraway becomes the skin that has to be porous and at the same time resisting. So we are porous because we can share our skins with other entities, technological or living, and at the same time remaining, avoiding to be destroyed by that. She also is very much into how far can we go in this sharing with other bodies, let's say. And this is what she called the cyborg being a kind of sharing of skins. And she defines it as, I quote, a cybernetic organism is a hybrid of machine and organism, a creature of social reality, as well as a creature of fiction. And I think this is very interesting because what I'm trying to talk about right now is that the new capacity that we have to develop are, of course, fictional. This new way that we have to apprehend the disappearance of archive demands us to invent a new form of fiction, to see ourselves as fictional characters because of this hybridity between the different skins. And what is interesting in what she does is that she argues for a feminist interpretation of cyborgs because they could be seen both as symbols of hybridity, the blending inherent in melting bodies with machines, and as forms of resistance to conventional gender norms. I want to give you another sentence by her that I find very interesting. We all have been injured profoundly. We require regeneration, not rebirth, and the possibilities for our reconstitution include the utopian dream of the hope for a monstrous world without gender. I like this sentence because it's immense. First of all, the fact of being injured, like the traumas, like the fact that she acknowledges that we're all wounded. We require regeneration, like we require plasticity, because regeneration is one meaning of plasticity. But this regeneration cannot happen through the ordinary means. We need to invent a utopia. And this utopia is the creation of the cyborg entity. Like, we have to become, in a way, monstrous. But the positive side of that is that this hybridation between different bodies or animals and machines can liberate us from the rigid gender norms or any kind of norms, in fact. So to me, this is a very good definition of plasticity. The acknowledgement of wounds and suffering, the need for regeneration, the need for reparation, and at the same time, the need to invent new modes of reparation and regeneration that cannot be the classical ones. So that cannot be like writing a book, but inventing a monstrous type of being. This is very different from transhumanism. There is something very attractive in this, to me, as I just said, because it's very close to what I try to elaborate on plasticity. This is not at all the other thing, transhumanism. Transhumanism is also something that uses technologies and defend the need to be hybridized, I don't know how to say that, with machines. But why? In order to surpass human limitations and enhance human faculties. Haraway is not at all into something like will become better, will become stronger. Not at all, it will become different. Transhumanism is about will become stronger. So the movement draws on advances in genetic engineering, neuroscience, robotics, artificial intelligence to help humans develop stronger intellectual, physical, and psychological capacities. So as you know, one of the major focus is life extension. They just want to eliminate death. Its adherents hope to eliminate aging, first of all, through therapies that can slow down or reverse aging process. So scientists are studying interventions such as telomere lengthening, that is a work on the genes, or regenerative medicine. Other aspects include prosthetic limbs, stronger than those of flesh and bone, exoskeletons for military operations or arduous labor, enhancing strength and endurance by augmenting biological musculature. I think you also exoskeletons. Sorry, I don't have an image. I'll show you other images. And it's not only about the body, it's also about the mind. Elon Musk is obsessed by cognitive enhancement. And he developed, as you know, the brain-computer interface, BCIs, connecting minds directly to machines that are supposed to expand many aspects of human intelligence, memory, learning, performance, allowing humans to merge more seamlessly with AI systems. Remember that Elon Musk's project was Neuralink, which was a chip that he had implanted in his brain in order to enhance the capacities. So this is Neuralink. I don't know if it's a bad or good news, but in fact, it works. I mean, it allows you, well, it is, I never really tried, of course, but it allows you to think much more quickly, to be much less tired, etc., etc. But this was a milder form of transhumanism, relying on plasticity as well. You know, Musk uses this term plasticity. But this was cool in a way. Now it's become much more frightening. I want to quote from an article, and I'll show you another image in a moment, an article published in the French journal Le Monde. Because Le Monde devoted a series on the tech giant this summer. Every day we had a beautiful portrait of one of these people. So it's about Peter Thiel. I said a few words about him yesterday. He's the manager, of PayPal. In the hours immediately following Peter Thiel's death, a specialized team will arrive to freeze his body and brain in liquid nitrogen. His corpse will be preserved in the hope that science will one day be able to bring him back to life. The co-founder of PayPal and Palantir was among the first Silicon Valley leaders to sign up for cryonic preservation through Alcor, a company founded in the San Francisco Bay Area in the early 1970s. Thanks to this new kind of life insurance, nearly 200 corpses, all Alcor policyholders, are already stored in a large facility in Arizona, far from the earthquake risks of California. So I show you an image of Alcor and of these corpses. So these are the, how do you call that, the tubes? I don't know, in which the corpses are preserved in nitrogen, far away from earthquakes. And of course, I let you imagine how expensive that is. So yes, this is this company called Alcor, and Peter Thiel. It's interesting. He's an interesting figure because he's a philosopher. At least he used to be one. He studied in Stanford, and his master was René Girard, the French philosopher. So he has a kind of philosophical background, and he writes books, etc. He tries to theorize this new transhumanist plasticity. And in a book called The Education of a Libertarian, he has this incredible sentence: I stand against the ideology of the inevitability of the death. Death is an ideology. And he says, dying is something that only happens to others. Yes, and he's taking hormone pills, etc. He has explored a lot of rejuvenation techniques involving transfusions of blood from the young, etc. So, in fact, this transhumanist ideology, as I said, is very present, even if we are not aware of it. Because, in fact, the negation of climate change, for example, is one of the consequences of that, because only a few people will survive. And the ones that will survive will be maintained by all these techniques. It's already happening, this kind of eugenic division between those who are doomed to die very quickly and those who will do whatever they can to make death as distant a possibility as possible. This is very serious, and the project of going to Mars is part of that. Because clearly, if you listen to Elon Musk, going to Mars means creating a new humanity. Why that? Because according to Peter Thiel, he says, look at our epoch. Okay, we have artificial intelligence, we have a lot of technology, we have this, we have that, but nevertheless, our epoch is one of stagnation. There is no acceleration. He says, let's try to compare different eras. Someone transported from 1860 to 1970 would find a completely different world. But comparing 1985 to 2025, the world seems very similar, suggesting a lack of fundamental change. According to transhumanists, the world is not changing. It says, what is our epoch? Of course, we have technology, but the old model of inscription is always present. This is what he calls the Greta future. Like Greta Thunberg, he hates her. He hates her because she is the symbol, I quote, of anti-growth, authoritarian, environmentalist dominated future. She's the old world, that is the world of the archive, you know, like the earth is our archive. Life has to be registered. We have to remember who we are, etc., etc. So for them, for the transhumanists, this is the persistence of the inscription model that is in contradiction of the morphological way. So, what is most disturbing today is the increasingly explicit eugenic drift of transhumanism. As I said, the distinction between those who deserve to live and the others. Recall that eugenicists sought to improve humanity through selective breeding and sterilization, fostering a notion of human enhancement. And once again, all the project of inventing a new humanity, superhumanity, going to Mars, etc., come from that. And I don't know if, I'm sure you saw this horrible advertisement. This one, I don't know if you saw it in the US. Sydney Sweeney has great genes, of course playing with the word genes. Like, you know, this is what we should all look like. Blonde, white, good health. And, well, it is absolutely intentional, the play on genes and genes. So, you see that, once again, the problem is how to resist and how to find the threshold, as I said a moment ago, between let's say, the constructive side of plasticity and its destructive one, because everything happens in the name of plasticity. The best and the worst. And this is the problem of our time. You know, for a long time in philosophy, we had what we call philosophies of difference. Derrida, Deleuze, Lyotard, Heidegger, it was all about difference. What is the difference between this and that? With the disappearance of the paradigm of inscription, we are losing the meaning of difference. It is very difficult to differentiate between extremes. It is very difficult to differentiate between post-humanism, transhumanism, good transformations, bad transformations, etc. Because even if we find all that ridiculous, we are influenced by it. Okay, we all participate in this model. Okay, it's not. I mean, of course we criticize it, but in reality, we are willingly part of it. So, for me, the main challenge of humanity today is the difference. We cannot be in the time of philosophies of difference. That's why I tried to write that book, Changing Difference. We have to find new tools, new concepts, in order to acknowledge the fact that we're moving on a very, very porous and moving line between creation and destruction. So again, I think that what we need is new theories of transformation. So I want to conclude on that, like the responsibility of the threshold. That will be my last part. Of course, as always, capitalism has understood the benefits it could draw from the notion of plasticity. It's and that makes difference. That makes the difficulty of difference between, as you know, every time we invent a critical tool, it is immediately absorbed by capitalism. So that's why plasticity has become this very moving term that is very, very often confused with flexibility. So the entire political challenge today, which is not only philosophical but also political, faced with unbridled transformability, where plasticity itself loses its head between its two contradictory meanings, creation and destruction, is our responsibility to find the threshold and to fix it. So not to abandon, but to invent resistance. This resistance does not consist in designing programs, because we are not fixed beings. We are, as Ainhoa Suarez, my dear friend, says, well, somos escultores de nuestra propia existencia, and I think this is very true and very beautiful, that we are the sculpture of ourselves, of our existence. But the problem is that we cannot, and this is something I tried to develop yesterday, we cannot refer to any authority, to any power, to any ground, to any government to help us do so. That's why I think that we are in a kind of anarchistic condition in which we alone, by ourselves, horizontally, I mean from below, have to invent the capacity to sculpt ourselves. We cannot ask anyone from above to help us doing this, because every political power today participates in transhumanism, in a way or another. And anyway, all governments today, as you can see, are constantly moving, and this constant morphological change is the sign that nothing is inscribed, that politics has become totally volatile. And so the only way to fix the threshold can only come from ourselves, from below and collectively. Plasticity reminds us that every augmentation, every enhancement is also a possible wound. That the capacity to endlessly reshape ourselves, to remain unfinished, is also the capacity to be injured. So it is up to us, collectively, horizontally, without command or obedience, to bear the immense responsibility of the threshold, without the help of government, without the help of difference, without the help of inscription. Plasticity teaches us to think of resistance not as a position, but as a constant tension between invention and disappearance. We must invent together the just forms of the future, refuse both the naive optimism of the engineers of tomorrow and the apocalyptic despair of those who proclaim the end. To protect, to risk, to pursue, as if there are no more traces, then let us make of our bodies and our minds moving archives. My last word is for Anna Mendieta. Thank you so much.
Muchísimas gracias, Catherine, por la conferencia. Creo que pasamos directamente a preguntas y respuestas, si les parece bien. Aquí tenemos una primera pregunta.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this amazing talk. I've been thinking about topics that are very close to your questions. First of all, I want to say that I admired the political project that I can hear behind, and I share it, and I totally share what I can imagine is your political project. And what I'm going to ask is, I don't want to contest what you were saying. I just want to really understand, because I have been also working with writing, traits, Derrida, Freud, blah blah blah. And what I cannot see in what you said today is the beyond of plasticity from the trace. I see what you add, what plasticity adds to writing, but I think the second part of your talk was the plasticity as another paradigm, and I don't see that, especially because I also think that you dismiss Freud too quickly. When you quote the mystic writing path, there's a part in that text that says, and I'm quoting because I know it by memory, the trace is la huella es duradera, is durable, but it's not unalterable. And I think the plasticity that you're looking for is still there. And also I don't see why the mystic writing path would be an obsolete analogy or metaphor of what you are trying to address. Because, first of all, because the mystic writing path, it's an analogy about the psyche, not the brain. And I think Freud is very clear about that. Like he says, I'm not looking the brain or the neuron in the project for scientific psychology. I'm not looking through a microscope, right? He's talking about a fiction, and I also think that what you're doing with the brain, it's an analogy. I think a metaphor. It's not, and it is a metaphor and analogy. But what I want to ask you is, where's the beyond of plasticity? I see what it adds, but I don't see the beyond.
You mean the beyond of the trace?
The beyond the trace.
So yes, the change of paradigm, the move, the passage from inscription to form, which is something I've been working a lot about. You know that Freud, if you want to focus on Freud, has this sentence according to which nothing is ever destroyed or forgotten in the unconscious. Meaning that even if we think we forgot, the trace is always there. You said, okay, but Freud was working on the psyche, not of the brain. That's the problem, precisely, because we know, thanks to neurology, that this affirmation that nothing is ever forgotten or erased is false. We precisely know today that we can lose memory forever without repair. We know that the talking cure is absolutely ineffective for brain patients, and that the frontier between the psyche and the brain has become very porous. So, I do think, I know it's provocative, but I do think that when Freud turned its back to neurology, it has to be interpreted psychoanalytically. I do think that it is a repression. You know? Everybody says, oh, how wonderful. he abandoned neurology to become a psychoanalyst. Okay, I think the other way around. I think that he dismissed something, and it's interesting today to understand why, and to contemplate the emergence of neurology that is so important today as a kind of return of the repressed.
Hello, good evening. Thank you, Catherine, for your amazing talk. I will try to be brief. Just one quick question. I think I'm the odd one out here because I'm a biologist. I'm not a philosopher or anything like that. So I'll be brief. I just wanted to ask, where does the boundary lie between our capacity of change as individuals, change, plasticity, flexibility, however you want to call it, and the change induced by the collective consciousness of, well, all the things that you talked about, capitalism or any other induced ideology that we could be, I don't know how to say it, victim to. And that's all. Thank you.
I think that's what precisely capitalism is doing, is to prevent us from going beyond our individuality. So clearly, I think we need to rethink the collective as also a way to put our brain in common. I think this is very important. That is to try to make this capacity for transformation a kind of collective thing. And in biology, I'm very much interested in all the theories of symbiosis, the symbiotic. I'm sure you know the work of Lynn Margulis, for example. Also, Bruno Latour has something like that about the earth, all the organisms living together. I think we should extend this notion of symbiosis, etc., to the collective and to the political, in order to because this is the only way we can get out of this transhumanist craziness, is to find a way to put our capacity in the middle and and create something symbiotic between us. And I think Jung, another repressed person, which is Jung, the collective and conscious, that was so dismissed, so quickly dismissed by Freud, should also be reread from that point of view.
Pensando en la plasticidad, me gustaría entender si en esta destrucción y construcción se podría pensar en una transbiología, ya no en un transhumanismo, sino en una transbiología.
And what do you mean by transbiology?
Para mí ha sido muy difícil entenderla. Creo que es un concepto demasiado nuevo que he tratado de encontrarlo, creo que un poquito más pensado desde la filosofía. Creo que todavía la biología se resiste a pensar en ella. Entonces me gustaría entender precisamente si este concepto se podría empezar a trabajar a partir de la plasticidad.
Is it transgenderism?
No solamente de género, sino es precisamente dejar la forma, ya no pensar solamente desde lo humano precisamente, pero sí desde ya no lo corpóreo, quizás viajar un poco más allá de pensarlo como una unidad.
Well, immediately I would give a little bit the same response about symbiosis. For example, the fact that we are living with so many organisms within ourselves, the microbiome, etc. So yes, I think in that sense we can speak of a transbiology, because our organism is plural. All organisms are plural. Yeah. So this is how I understand your question. And yes, this is an interesting concept, transbiology.
Muchas gracias por la conferencia. Quisiera pedirte si puedes desarrollar un poco más la idea de que el reto para la humanidad es la diferencia, porque creo que sí, ahí hay una clave importantísima, dado el contexto neoconservador y pues todo el discurso, ¿no?, xenofóbico, transfóbico, etcétera, que hay en el mundo. Gracias.
Well, I've tried to determine in my work what comes first. Is it transformation or is it difference? Does difference comes from the capacity to change, or is the capacity to change coming from difference? And I came to the conclusion that plasticity was prior. Because, as I tried to explain, in many domains, the possibility of making difference, of differentiate between many things, many people, many political ideas, has become very difficult, if not impossible. So now the way in which I see reality is not as a series of differences, but I always try to interpret what I see as what has been transformed. What forms do I see, and where do they come from? You know, it's more like that instead of seeing differences. I don't know if this is clear, but this is a new way of seeing the real. Because whenever I look, wherever I look, I don't see differences anymore. I only see forms, like in the murals. I was so impressed by your murals here in Mexico, particularly those who retrace the history of the country. And it's only by forms. As if, in fact, it was all the forms that constituted differences and not the other way around. I don't know if I express myself well because I'm not an artist, but I was very impressed by that. That form speaks first. And then you see the differences, or even the mural in here at the UNAM. For me, it is very striking because it is, yes, a series of forms and transformations that are the first impressions, and then you can start looking at differences. Yes.
Está aquí chico.
Thank you, Catherine. The main question is in regards to, I was wondering, what would you think about the plasticity of death? Of death. I was wondering, you were speaking to this, the paradigm of transhumanism and posthumanism, and how, for instance, transhumanists would believe that, one of the tasks for human beings in our epoch would be like killing death, right? And being, killing death would mean to live forever. So putting an end of that is kind of to annihilate the end itself, right? And I was wondering, plasticity seems to be like this type of category where you can think from like extremes, or maybe from different ends. So it made me think, like, plasticity could be such thing as becoming, as for Hegel, like being and non-being, or like a category between finitude and infinity, right? So in that term, in that sense, I'm trying to think like plasticity in terms of, it almost feels like, I'm not sure if my intuition is correct, it almost feels like the plastic death, or the plasticity in death would not mean to kill death, but to keep on dying endlessly. Like to not only find new ways to die, but also for death to be infinite in some sense.
Yes, that's extremely interesting. Thank you so much. And you know, for me, the great thinker of that is Hegel. You know, this is what dialectics is about. The whole Hegelian system is about negativity, as you know, and the way in which death can be transformable. Not because we can stop it, of course, but because there are several ways of dying, and because, as you said, death is a kind of indefinite process. This is what dialectics is about. What is happening today is a kind of masquerade of that. It's a kind of transvestissement of what Hegel has said. But yes, I do.
But do you mind me asking if I could just follow up? So, like plasticity, what would you think a plastic death or plasticity and death?
Excuse me, what
yeah,
I think?
Yeah, what do you think about, like, if you even could conceive something like a plastic death, if that makes sense, like a plasticity?
Of course, but this would, again, this would have to be extremely philosophical and be a reflection about negativity, about because plasticity, as you understand, is this crazy thing in which negativity is at the heart of life. Plasticity is a concept that acknowledges the importance of negativity, which also means the importance of death. So the plasticity of death would not mean at all what transhumanists say, which is, oh, we can perhaps one day suppress death is a crazy idea. But how we can live with our death, which is something totally different. Yeah.
Aquí en la primera fila y luego allá y terminamos.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Again, was amazing. It was different, and it is lots of things to think about it. But I was thinking about the end of yesterday's session, that you ended with the idea of provocation, of getting rid somehow of the subject, subjectivity, and I'm guessing as well subjectivation. And after that provocation, I was just thinking now if we shouldn't also get rid about humanism as a concept as well, because it's in this post-humanism, but also transhumanism, the idea of the human
is, yes.
It's also like the one that is provoking, because there is like, it kind of implies, because of the history of thought and philosophy, some essence that limits plasticity. So I don't know if we should also get rid about the idea of the human and humanity and try to locate this responsibility that you speak so beautiful about, and this necessity of putting the responsibility somewhere to go.
Okay. Yes, of course. Thank you so much for this question, and you're totally right that the human is a concept that has to be deconstructed for many reasons. But at the same time, and I tried to show it was porous, but at the same time, because of the Anthropocene, I wonder nevertheless if we could not keep something from it. Because the Anthropocene, as you know, means anthropos, what has been created by the human. I mean, there is, in the catastrophe in which we are, clearly a responsibility of the anthropos. That's why it is not so easy to just get rid of it. Even if I totally agree with you that it is a complex notion. But the Anthropocene means that we have become a geological force.
Thank you very much. I was wondering what is your stance on technology and what is the relationship that you see with plasticity? Because when we talk about transhumanism, there is a very rigid image of technology. And I think that there are some post-humanist stance where technology is trying to think in another way, like with Haraway and with Hiles, for example, that you mentioned. So I was wondering, if the concept of plasticity, as you mentioned, like coming from the arts and going in this for this operative like I just forgot the word, but yeah, it's an operative gesture, yes, so to speak. And what can we think then and in this relationship? Because I was thinking, especially in the critique to the ill-form theory from Simondon, and how is this concept like not just form, like doing a form, like taking form, but information, and how we can think like information regarding like technologies like in the state of today, going to another direction, that it's not that this rigid form of technology as is seen in transhumanism.
Yes, thank you so much. I totally agree with you that there are two possible tendencies today about the way of thinking technology. The one is the robotic direction, which is Haraway and many others, and the other one, the Simondonian one, which is about information. And as you know, plasticity is a very important concept in Simondon. So clearly, what Simondon tells us is that the relationship we have with technology is one of shaping, and that, if I remember well, the theory of information, etc., relies on respect. In fact, the relationship we have to develop with technology has to be respectful, not utilitarist or utilitarian. There is a trend in technology which is just a tool, so it doesn't. It's not worth anything. We can just throw it away. On the contrary, in Simondon, technology urges us to think about it ethically, and I think this is a total other way of thinking about plasticity and technology. And I think that out of this respect for the machines, we might also find a way to find the threshold. I think this is very interesting in Simondon. And I was reading an article the other day about about ChatGPT, and the article was, can it suffer? Do we have the right to talk to it badly, unrespectfully? And that was very interesting because it reminded me of Simondon.
Muchas gracias, Catherine.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the question.
Muchas gracias a todos, muchas gracias a Ainhoa.